Welcome back to Plastic Surgery Untold, the greatest podcast in the world, as voted by us. I'm Dr. Johnny Franco, also known as Austin Plastic Surgeon. We have a celebrity crew again with us, and special guest, Dr. MAHLON Kerr. So we'll get back to him in a minute, because today's topic is building an empire the synergy way. And so we'll dive into that in just a minute. But celebrity, catch us up a little bit. What's going on in your life? This episode, I can actually see the colors. It looks like you got a nice red festive sports coat on there.
You talking about
me?
Celebrity anesthesia or
well, most beautiful man, Gilberto. I'm sorry, I'm just confusing you guys. You guys are both gorgeous. Thank you.
I thought
You're
you were
welcome.
having a stroke for a second.
It's just that red is just throwing me off here.
Well, I felt like last time my green jacket just didn't come across as well as I wanted it to, and so I thought I'd bring the holiday spirit a little more this time with the red jacket and the plaid pocket square.
No question. You're bringing the thunder.
Yeah.
Well, what's new in your life? What's going on?
Just winding down the year, getting ready for the holidays, and as a matter of fact, I got in the holiday spirit, and to kind of piggyback on your little anniversary gift from our last episode, I wanted to get you guys a little something. So
Can we open this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I see a little.
If we got some time, yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't got that much time, but I still want to open a present. Let's
I know how much you like those.
I do like. Oh, dude, this is cool. Yeah, I mean some Star Wars socks, Stance. I love this brand.
Oh, yeah, man.
Dude, this is cool. Awesome.
These are awesome.
Well, thank you, Gilberto.
You're welcome.
I didn't get you shit, but thank you. I appreciate
No, that's
it.
okay. No, so I know how much you like Star Wars, Dr. Franco, and
I love this.
and
Dr. Seuss running socks. I'm digging it, man. Thank you.
Travis is training for his half marathon, so there's a little running theme to those socks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Especially he'll be able to show those off with his knee-high, capri pants that he wears, those scrub pants. But
Producer Donald got
First
something
of all,
too.
they're joggers.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
What did he get? We'll have to post a picture of that on our Instagram. Celebrity, what about you? Survived your first couple weeks in your new house?
Survived the move, yep, and into the new house. My wife has been posting all about it on her stuff at Your Trendy Therapist. Shameless plug number 3084.
You didn't give her a plug last episode.
I know I didn't, man. I'm sure.
How was the week on the couch?
That. It was rough.
Okay.
Maybe double plug this week.
Yeah, she'll get 2 plugs. Just getting settled into the house and everything. And we were talking about something earlier today. How when we first started packing up to move, we were looking at all this stuff that we had. And we're like, man, we got to get rid of some of this stuff. We got to sell some of it back. We got to take it to Salvation Army or Goodwill, whatever. And we're looking at it and we're like, I haven't used this in like 2 years, but maybe we could use it for like a costume next year or something, and then we'd keep it. And then like as we got closer to the actual move, that was like, I haven't used that in 4 days. Throw it away. And like we didn't even care anymore. It was just funny to see.
My favorite is when you sold something on a Facebook Marketplace.
Oh God!
And it said that they had to carry it out themselves, and in the end, you ended up carrying everything out, putting it together, disassembling it, X, Y, and Z. I thought you were going to go to their house and put it together for them.
Compliments of at Your Trendy Therapist. The wife set me up for that one. She's like, "Oh yeah, no, he can help." And then I walk in, and now I've got to unload an entire back of a U-Haul.
Because it was like an 8-year-old and like 7-year-old man who just had back surgery.
His grandpa's
that showed up at your house.
Like, okay, well, I guess I'm bringing this mirror and all this stuff downstairs myself.
Well, we got our special guest here, Dr. MAHLON Kerr, who's actually the founder and CEO of Synergy Plastic Surgery here in Austin, Texas. And so we're talking about the business of plastic surgery, and maybe we'll let him introduce himself a little bit and then dive into kind of all the things that go into making a plastic surgery business run to be able to provide care for all the patients here in Austin and Central Texas, really.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So Synergy Plastic Surgery is our business. We've been here for, a little over 10 years.
Wow.
Just trying to bring beauty to the Austin market.
I think one of the things that's actually surprising, I mean, I know you said we're pretty close in age, and so, 10 years doesn't, it actually sounds like a lot, but for the amount of stuff that your practice has done in 10 years, I think most people would think that you have been in practice a lot longer than that. And you want to just to kind of put this whole kind of podcast in context, you want to tell us a little bit, because you started as just single provider, and then where you're at now?
Yeah. So in 2010, I I thought I was actually going to stay at the university where I trained, and I was going to do pediatric plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery.
I thought I was going to be a pediatric plastic surgeon.
Yeah.
And then I went through the children's hospital, and boom, 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 I'm doing butts.
It's funny because
One thing leads to another, and there you go.
I think if it weren't for the economic downturn in 2008, I probably would be that person now. And what happened essentially was I was offered a fellowship specifically in pediatrics, which is sort of the traditional track, and was then offered a faculty job after the fellowship would be completed. And then sort of towards the 2009, I basically was told that there may or may not be a job, but there sure would be the fellowship. And at the point that we're at, you think about it, we do college, 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, and then in my particular case, 6 years of residency. To be told that you would do a 7th year and then there may or may not be a job at the end of that, it really wasn't the right choice for me. And so I'd always been interested in business, had done a little dabble in like private label skincare during residency, and figured out how to start a website and create a company and sell a product. And so for me, it wasn't too much of a leap to kind of get this concept of hanging a shingle. So my wife, Ashley, and I moved to Austin, and literally did just that. I mean, came up with a brand, came up with a logo, location, built out an office, and started the practice with us and a single employee who was like a traditional sort of medical manager. She did our office billing. I think like many plastic surgeons, we started in a very traditional way in that I took call. I was actually doing all my cases at the hospital for the first 5 years that I was here, including my cosmetic cases, which is actually kind of unusual and some little bit of a glitch in the Austin market that ended up getting ironed out. You can't do that anymore. It's too expensive. But I had kind of a good deal. And
Ashley's a nurse.
Yeah. So my wife was a nurse injector, and so that was helpful because in the beginning she did everything. So she was my coordinator doing the quotes. She was also building her injectable practice, and then literally rooming, seeing patients, doing procedures with me, and in fact even scrubbing in the OR with me as a first assist. And we went along like that for about a year. We came in with the help of St. David's, which is one of the sort of large medical hospital groups that's here, through a form of an income guarantee where essentially they say you're going to make this much money a month. We came off the guarantee in 3 months because we were making more money than they anticipated that we would. And just sort of never looked back. We had a brief brush with an associate for about a year in 2012. So Dr. Buchanan, who's currently in my practice, was in Florida, was unhappy, wanted to come to Austin. And, at the time, I've always been somebody who's sort of looking for this concept of like infrastructure expansion, giving a good place for people to work and do good work, and just sort of fostering that. So we brought her in. She ended up having a baby and just kind of was a bit too much, and so she left for a few years and then came back later. But for me, we kind of kept along that path for about 4.5 years. And in a traditional medical practice, we had a 5-year lease. Lease was coming due. Decided, much like yourself, that it was time to invest in commercial real estate, which I do believe is one of the best things you can do as a physician. And so ended up buying 2 condo suites that were in the same medical complex but in different buildings. And one of them was actually designed to be a true ASC or ambulatory surgical center. Has a nice porte-cochere, covered opening. It was totally designed to be that way. And then the developer couldn't find anybody to buy it, and then sort of sold off chunks. And all that was left was like 2,000 square feet, which is not enough size for a traditional ambulatory facility, but it actually is a pretty good, decent size for a single room plastic surgery operating room. So did that, branded it as a separate entity with the thought that perhaps over time people outside of the practice could use it. It doesn't look like, it looks like our practice, but it doesn't, there's no outside logos or anything like that. And then built out an office, just a standard clinic in the next building over. And at that point started everything that has changed since. So, that year, Dr. Blagg, who was my first traditional associate, who was actually an intern when I was a chief. So I've known him for a long time, prior to him coming, about 7 years. He actually went through and actually did the pediatric plastic surgery. he does not actually do pediatric plastic surgery, but he did spend a year training in it.
And we're going to dive into that in a minute.
And so then hired him, then hired Dr. Mechanic back the next year, then hired Dr. Crawford the year after that, and she's been with us for, I believe it'll be 16 months, 16 months right now. And spoiler alert, I've in the process of hiring another plastic surgeon who will come into the Austin market probably in the spring.
And correct me, but you guys now have 2 separate locations, one in Round Rock, one in South Austin.
I got ahead of myself. So we'd had a satellite location in Austin since 2012, and we had a 3-year lease on 800 square feet of just tiny. And we did it primarily for a very business savvy move, which is geolocation within SEO optimization for Google. And so understanding plastic surgery from a business standpoint is understanding high level internet marketing. And boots on the ground is required for effective marketing. And so even though that office was tiny, and in fact, there was nobody there. Like, we would just travel there as a group. So, like, the nurses, everybody would come for the day that we were there. We still got mail there, and it became our geolocation for our website, which was critical for us to compete in a otherwise suburb location of Round Rock.
And because you dropped so many nuggets there, and so maybe we'll back up a little bit, because it's interesting just to hear and see, one, for anybody listening, what and just so people know, I always refer to the two of you as a power couple, because I feel like you guys complement each other so well. And I don't mean this the wrong way, but you're very business, you're super smart, very like to the point, where I feel like Ashley is the sugar. She knows how to make all the magic kind of come together. And that may not be what's going on at home, because I see the faces here.
She's like a spicy sugar. I don't know. Like, I'm the dreamer, and she's the one that yanks like the choke collar.
But I do think that you guys are an incredible power couple together. But, it's funny to see how the transformation, because what you guys have accomplished in 10 years, I think, from any regards, and Celebrity sees a bunch of practices, Chief Berto's been a part of a bunch of practices, I think is absolutely phenomenal. And that's why I thought you were an incredible guest for this type of podcast. But even the transformation where you went from the traditional starting of taking an ER call, building your practice, and doing, those type of things, which I think is super important. I've taken an ER call. I've done my midnight calls of jaw fractures and finger pinning and so forth. But it's funny how the world has evolved, and I feel like people either evolve or kind of don't. But you've already transitioned to a lot of these other sophisticated and we call it marketing, but it's really educating patients about the opportunities that are out there and the quality people that do a good system.
Yeah, and I think ultimately marketing is just connecting somebody who wants something with somebody who provides it. Sure. And in a perfect world, and in fact, this is Google's biggest wish, right, is that when you type in that search term, you find whoever it is you're looking for. And so the key is, how do we not only provide that amazing experience, but then how do we reach out and connect with those patients that are looking for the services that we provide?
And it's funny that you said that, because the number one question on my thing for your business stuff is, how do you expand from just, it's easy to control the patient experience, the quality of care that you guys give when it's power couple plus one. But now that you've expanded, because how many people do you have in your practice now?
I mean, probably a little over 30.
So you got 30 people. How do you control that experience? Mm-hmm. Because I know the kind of person that you are and Ashley is, and you would never want anything but an incredible experience for no matter whose patient is, whether it's yours, one of your associates, throughout the whole system. And I know you've done a lot of things to make sure that experience is quality no matter who they're seeing.
I mean, I think you try and get it as close as you can, but I think at the end of the day, you have to realize that the physicians that you're hiring, the nurse injectors you're hiring, these people that are hiring that are part of your brand and part of your core identity, they all have their own sort of unique way of delivering medicine. And so you have to kind of give and take a little bit.
Okay.
So some things need to be the same. So the approach to, like, when you call the office, how you're called back, how we vet and educate you before you come in to your appointment, those things are all the same. But I mean, and then how the appointment exists, as far as like what room is it in, like how is the flow, that's the same. But the actual things that certain physicians or nurse injectors are going to hit on, or those are going to change a little bit, right? And so I think the goal is that you kind of walk away with the essence of synergy, but that essence is applied obviously in a unique fashion with each person that's caring for you.
Which I think is actually really kind of cool, because we were talking about this on one of our other episodes, is that, someone who comes to see me, someone who comes to see you, it's personalities mesh with different people. And so it's so funny because, who somebody's going to mesh with, and you want somebody who, that we have the same ideas, the same goals, and that it just kind of flows. And it's some of the nice things of everyone not being exactly the same in the office.
Right. And I think that part of the sales team is, they get that initial call, and then their job is to kind of figure out who that patient is. Not only the procedure that they want, but, maybe a little bit about their personality and obviously their time frame. And so all those things affect sort of where they're going to get directed within the practice, and affects their ultimate experience. But, the goal is that we get the right person with the right surgeon, and we get it within the right time frame, and then that experience sort of feels the same, kind of, even though it might be a little bit different along the way. And that's the essence of a brand.
And it's funny because it sounds like a lot of things you've done are both, challenges and wins, because you're making more flexibility for patients. Because as before this podcast, in a previous one, we'd had Dr. Saxon, who does some facial feminization surgery, and we laugh because something I don't do. And it's funny, when you bring more people in, you kind of expand that bubble of services you can provide. It's just, I feel like, especially in a city like Austin and today's world, there's no way you or I can singly do every aesthetic procedure out there. It's just not doable anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that, most of us are kind of doing similar things within the group. Don't have any huge outliers one way or another. And I think that can be considered good or bad. But we pretty much offer everything through the group of, all the different associates and partners. And that's kind of the goal. But to go back to the idea of making the brand consistent, I think that's probably one of the hardest things. And I think that, I've had certainly my own failures in that, and it's hard to go from one location to two. And we're about to go from 2 locations to 3, and that's going to be even more of a challenge. And so part of that, I think, is developing, protocols and policies, and hiring for the culture of the business. But part of it also is just structure. And so I've got a COO, so Chief Operations Officer, is going to start on Monday, who's my first real executive besides me. And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. And what would you say has been your biggest challenge through this road?
That's a great question. I don't, everything's been pretty easy. I think the biggest challenge is keeping everybody happy. To be honest with you, I think that, it's easy to keep the patients happy, but it's harder to keep the staff happy. So I think managing experience, keeping the staff all happy, and by happy I mean like working well together, right? Because medical practice is like a big family, right? So families are going to infight and have their own issues, and it's important that while I know that that's going to happen, at the end of the day, it doesn't affect the experience, right? So if Becky and Sally are in a tiff, the patient should never know that.
It's funny because the challenges have been hard of keeping people happy. You and I text pretty frequently, just questions, and so it's nice to have someone to bounce stuff. But even COVID has been a challenge. How do you balance the needs of the practice versus individuals and so forth? And just when people are stressed overall, I think sometimes makes it harder to keep everybody happy.
Yeah, the quarantine was an interesting time, and we spent a lot of time on the phone together, and it was really helpful for me to kind of think about these things and all the things that we were figuring out. But it's funny, as you reflect back on that time, I think that none of us really had a sense of how much that was going to extrapolate an interest in plastic surgery, and how plastic surgery was all of a sudden going to become, probably one of the better years ever, minus the fact that we couldn't work for 7 weeks. But it'll be interesting to see how this trend in a significant interest in having work done falls out over the next 2 years.
For the plastic surgeons listening to our podcast now, because I think one of the things you mentioned, when I was in Miami, I was part of a big group, and it's interesting. They had a group of 3, which in Miami to keep 3 surgeons together for 10 years is a challenge. and unfortunately, one of them parted, shortly before I left, and I left for separate reasons, just because I always wanted to come back to Texas. It was a great experience for me. But how do you go about, because part of keeping people happy and keeping that synergy way, you talked a little bit about personality. How'd you go about finding somebody that you thought was a good fit for your practice? It sounds like one of them you knew personally, but it's almost going to be hard to just call people you know personally and say, hey, come join our practice. And there's people who I think are great surgeons and I know personally, probably wouldn't invite them into my practice.
Yeah. I think
no offense, Gilberto.
None taken.
Yeah, I think you gotta hire for the culture, right? So you're never gonna hire somebody who doesn't have what I would say are good hands, or is not a skilled or safe surgeon. So that's, you just kind of cut that off, right? Those people don't even. That's somebody you're never going to talk to, right? And then you need to hire somebody who I think can be kind of happy and wants to just kind of show up and sort of do their job, and so I think you want to hire for that in a group setting, and then somebody who has personality, who gets along with patients. I mean, I think a big part of our experience is, none of our surgeons have poor bedside manners. They all have, I think, charismatic personalities. And in a positive way, because charismatic personalities in surgery could mean terrible things. And it's sort of like this new guy who's gonna should start in the spring. Just a very charismatic surgeon who can execute a case. And I think that if you have those two things, then that person can be successful. It's just putting in the business side of it to plug in and just create interest and create, sales, which ultimately creates surgeries, and then, happy patients.
And then, because you also have some nurse injectors, PAs, and it'd be interesting to get Gilberto's perspective, because it sounds like that's probably a similar process when you're trying to decide to bring in nurses, PAs, mid-levels, someone to that degree into your practice.
Yeah, so Gilberto, no bad feelings. We do not have any mid-levels. I think I desperately sort of need a mid-level, actually. And so it'll be interesting to see with this new executive guy what he recommends, because he comes from a more traditional versus a plastic surgery background. But we have nurse injectors. We have 3, and the concept is that you would have those sort of med spa services available at every location, right? And the Round Rock location is our original flagship. It is our biggest current location. It won't be when we move to the 3rd location, but we'll always have that, because there's great synergy with a nurse injector and a plastic surgery office.
I see what you did there.
Oh,
yeah. And I think that, and the other thing about having a practice that's heavy with surgeons is that we're able to provide those services without necessarily the need for a mid-level, because all of our new patients can see a surgeon. And then, they can have that initial contact, that sort of legal H&P done. And then the nurse injectors are simply executing order plans, based on the protocols assigned by the surgeon.
Go ahead.
I was just going to compliment.
No, go ahead. Defend your honor. Go ahead.
I was just going to compliment Dr. Mahlon. He's got some really, really, really talented nurse injectors in his practice. So kudos to you on that.
Thanks. And that's my wife. My wife has a great relationship in the community, as I think I've tried to do as well. And I will tell you that those things come in handy when it's time to look for someone.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny because people forget Austin's still a small town, and so either way, if you're a very quality provider in town, word gets around. If you're not, word gets around as well.
Yeah. I think reputation is really important.
And then, one of the interesting points that you made, because I think a difference between your practice that has grown and does a large volume versus, other practices or models around the country, especially coming from Miami, because you made one point where patients always get to see their physician. And so, and not saying that they may not see a nurse or somebody if somebody shopped on a different day or something and needed some care or something, but they're going to have a consult with the actual physician before a surgery.
Yeah, I mean, always, of course, before a surgery. I think that, I think that the right physician is going to be the best salesperson you can ever hire, because we are architect build, right? So we are everything. We are your interior design. We are your architect. We are your actual builder or contractor. We are executing the vision, right? And so who better to explain that to the patient and get the patient excited about their potential outcome than to have the actual person who's going to, execute that operation and sort of realize that dream.
Can we roll in, because we've talked about the patient experience, and then you mentioned keeping people happy. So staff is one thing, but I feel like keeping surgeons happy is a whole other beast in of its own. And some of it you've done by picking personalities that I think have fit well with the practice, but some of that too is keeping them busy. And you alluded to a little bit, because it sounds like the surgeons that you bring into your practice are people who want to have a certain busyness, but they want a lot of the exterior stuff kind of taken care of. And maybe talk about how you've set up a system to keep them busy, take away a lot of the headaches that maybe they don't want to deal with. And it sounds like you've hired people who love operating, love taking care of patients, but kind of don't want to have to deal with the other stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're going to see more and more common, right? And the things that attracted...
The hospitals have already done this.
Yeah, right. I mean, and the things that attracted me to plastic surgery were the ability to have to deal with those things, right? So the concept that when I started, I became basically my life has been focused on plastic surgery since 2001. So for 20 years, I've been, not necessarily in medical school every day, but I mean, I scrubbed hundreds of cases in plastic surgery. All my mentors were plastic surgeons. I mean, just like you. I mean, my whole direction in life for 20 years has been that. And but part of that was the concept that when I got into plastic surgery, something like 65% of plastic surgeons were in solo office, basically small business owners, right? And I think that if you fast forward now, that's probably like half that. It's probably 30%. And certainly I think a lot of the people coming out are a lot less interested in sort of that concept of hanging a shingle and starting a business.
And if you get outside of plastics, I would love to see that number. I bet it's even lower than that, because it just from a system, it's so hard to survive most family practices have bought out internal medicine to be by yourself and not be a big group. It's just,
it's hard. And I think just the key is just infrastructure. And so, you create the kind of infrastructure that you would want to have, and then that's also the infrastructure that your friend would want to have, right? And so then I think it becomes somewhat easy. There's still glitches along the way, and certainly things that we can work on. But I think the concept is, build a nice operating room, have nice equipment, build a nice office, have nice exam rooms, try and hire staff that are competent, which is probably one of the biggest challenges. To be honest with you, to keeping surgeons happy is having staff that are awesome, and staff that get along with all the surgeons, because they're all a little different, right? So everyone's pet peeve is different, and so we try as much as possible with the group to do clinically the same things. So we try and have set points for activity levels and kind of the way that we are using binders or using soft bras or like massaging breast after implants. I mean, we try and be consistent so that not only it makes more of a sort of this homogenous experience, but it's also easier for the staff, right? Because if they have to remember 5 different ways of doing a breast augmentation sort of post-op, it becomes a little more challenging. And so I think you got to find surgeons who are willing to adapt their methods. And that being said, with every new acquisition of the practice, we learn something new.
And some of the stuff, the concepts make sense, and this is why hospitals, other things have made, changes. Is even my practice in Miami, it's nice when you have 3 or 4 people, because even if you're on vacation, there's always somebody at the practice to take care of them. So that's a benefit to the patients themselves.
Totally.
That's a benefit to, you or I, who doesn't have to call, several people and be like, hey, I'm going out of town for a week. Can you cover for me? You've kind of got that built into the practice, I would assume.
Yeah, right. And the more people you have, the easier it is to do. And it creates a seamless experience for the patients. They just call and they're seen.
And then talk to a little bit, especially since we got celebrity here. I know we've picked on Gilberto a little bit, but you've incorporated, as you alluded to earlier, operating rooms and probably some anesthesia into your system, which again kind of controls that experience, makes something easy for your team to be able to already have operating rooms there.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and I think that there's the physical operating room, and then there's the equipment, and investing in the right type of liposuction technology and so forth that everybody wants to use. But then it's again, it's the staff, right? So it's having the staff that's used to doing that tummy tuck, and they know how to execute that operation easily and how to get that patient ready and kind of
you don't get stuck with somebody like celebrity doing your anesthesia and then it's downhill from there. Who knows what's going to happen?
It's just,
can I put another quarter in the machine?
It's more fun when they're moving, man.
You can do it with people you've never met before, and that's that's the beauty of American medicine, right? I mean,
Sure.
It's done the same way at every location everywhere. But if you have a staff that's dedicated and focuses on only plastic surgery, it does make things a little easier.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It streamlines the process. I mean, me and Johnny talk about it all the time. It's just when we're in there together doing a case, and we've got a couple other staff in there that are used to doing our cases, and somebody like Gilberto in the room. I mean, cases just fly by. We get things done. We barely even have to talk because it's like this seamless dance, and everybody's got a portion, and everybody's got their part, and it just works. It works
Like a well-oiled machine.
like a well-oiled machine.
And even to some of the equipment, because if we're in separate practices, if I buy a Vaser liposuction, you buy a Vaser liposuction, it becomes extremely expensive. If you have 3-4 physicians that are all doing this, now it makes it worthwhile to invest in some of these equipment, which sometimes is very hard as a individual provider.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely adds up. I mean, probably one of the biggest challenges for us is that our two operating rooms are, they're not connected, so they're 45 minutes apart. And so while that's helpful for the patients and I think helpful for the growth of the practice, it means that you have to have two of everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just adds up to the cost of that. But I mean, it's just like anything. You invest in good equipment, and it should last for years. So.
From the flip side, for people just finishing residency sort of stuff, what questions would you tell those people looking for a practice to join? Maybe 2 or 3 questions or things that you would tell them to ask or look for, from when they're trying to join a practice. Any tips you would give them?
Yeah, I think that you need to vet how that practice is how it's gonna end or how it's gonna evolve, right? Maybe not necessarily end. Evolve would be a better term. Because you're either going to come on as an employee and you're always going to be an employee, or maybe you're going to come on with the concept that you'd be a partner, or maybe in a more traditional way you're come on with the idea that you're ultimately going to replace the person who's hiring you. And I think replace the person who hires you is a pathway that's ultimately probably going to go away, because there's so many differences between this person who's coming out who's probably 32, 33, and somebody who's trending down and ending their career, and they're 65, maybe 70. I mean, plastic surgeons tend to stick around longer than they should.
And I've heard those horror stories too, where somebody comes on, in a year or two you're going to take over my practice. 4 or 5 years has gone by and that person is not retired, and it keeps being next year endlessly too.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I would look for similarities, right? So look for people who are, your age. I mean, that's part of a huge benefit to us is that, we're all kind of 40-ish, which is enough so that you worked out the kinks. You essentially have mastery of the probably, 40 to 60 odd procedures that we might do at any one given time. And I think that is, pretty critical if you want to have a long-term relationship. Is you just got to look for somebody who's kind of like you.
And would you say employment versus partnership trap, one's better than the other, or is it just kind of depends on situation, personalities?
I think it depends on situation, personality. So I've done it both ways. I have people that are essentially associates and may always be associates, and I have somebody like Ross Blagg, who was hired with the concept that in a very traditional way he would achieve partnership over time, and has done that. And so I'm flexible both ways. I think it is helpful for people to have some skin in the game. So I do think that even a minority partnership is appropriate over time. And I think that the key as the business owner is to make those to make that partnership not only affordable, but just to make it achievable, right? So I think that the bar to entry can be low or it can be extremely high. I mean, these people could buy into practices for millions of dollars and then pay millions of dollars for the real estate. But you can actually, sell somebody a smaller piece of the pie. They can see a reward for that pie, and then they're a little bit more vested in the outcome and the care they're providing. And I think that's really more the approach that we'll take over time.
And I think you made a great point because I've experienced a little bit of it, and I know friends who had joined practices have felt some of this. Is it's one thing to just say, yeah, we'll talk about partnership down the road. You'll be able to, but without anything kind of structured or some timeline of when that comes about, I think that's a slippery slope a little bit.
Yeah,
would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, like all contracts, you need to understand, what the evolution of that contract is, and of course, understand what the complete collapse of that contract looks like. And and I think if you have all those terms, then you're not in a situation where you're all of a sudden 5 years in and realize that the deal is a very different deal than what you thought it was going to be. So I think that's probably one of the more important things to vet as you as you enter a plastic surgery practice or as you look for a job, so to speak.
Sure. I did have a question. This one's for you and Dr. Franco. When you guys are hiring front office people, whether it's MAs, receptionists, other nurses, anything besides a physician, partner, or associate, what do you guys look for when you're hiring those positions? Or what advice would you give those listeners?
I think that's the hardest thing, because it's hard. I think it's hard because a lot of it's trying to find somebody, in a quick interview, trying to find people. And unfortunately, a lot of these positions people transition to because some of our MAs end up becoming nurses or progressing to other stuff. And I don't know. I think it's been hard. I always feel like, the right attitude is the biggest thing. And if you ever read the book Blink, I feel like a lot of times you get a good feel right away whether somebody's got good energy, if they're being positive, if they're motivated. If somebody's not motivated, if somebody doesn't have a good attitude, I feel like you can't fix those two things. And so, if they're just trying to learn a little bit more specific about plastic surgery, I feel like we can teach them our way. But the first two, if you don't have those, deal breaker.
Yeah, I think you have to be intelligent and you have to be motivated. Because I can teach anybody anything. They have to be able to actually learn it.
Sure.
It's and some of it's been challenging, because even when we've tried to interview, just trying to be with the COVID right now, we've tried to do some of our initial ones either phones or Zooms, which I feel like is its own art of interviewing via some of those things, because you get some vibe or some idea of what people are doing. If you come for an interview and it's your very first interview and you're all dressed up and you look good, it's like, okay, this person at least took this seriously, put some time. Where you never know if they're on the phone, who knows? They're probably in flip flops, shorts, still have brush their teeth from the morning.
Not doing the Zoom while they're driving.
While they're driving, that's the key right there. That's exactly what I was thinking about.
No, this is going great.
While they're driving, that's how important they're like they even pull over.
What other? Because we'll have to move on here in just a little bit. If you could give one or two other nuggets to either somebody starting a practice or want to join a practice, what would be one or two advice you would give to people listening out there?
I mean, I think when you're starting a practice, I would say look for opportunity, right? I mean, that's just classic business, right? So you want to look for somewhere where you're going to be successful. And so that may not necessarily be the town that you grew up in, right? For me, it wasn't. And so I think you have to look for opportunity. And then I think you just have to not do stupid things like name the practice after yourself, because then fast forward 10 years, you might have 4 other surgeons that are working for you. And that's, and I wouldn't also name your location after your geographic location, because if you expand past it, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, no, I
Austin plastic surgery.
Yeah, just narrow myself down. Fuck it. Oh well, fuck.
I was going to say
Dude,
something, but I didn't want to say anything.
I just take it. Fucking punch in the face. That's cool. One thing I would say from my own experience is, just because you start somewhere doesn't mean that you're stuck there forever. And I feel like there's value in it. I spent 3 years in Miami. I thought I learned a lot. I thought it was a great time. Just because you move on, it's not the end of the world. And a huge majority of people don't finish their practice where they started. I think it's something like 70-80% of people change careers at least once. I think something in the first 5 or 7 years. So, if you're not in a good spot, or if it was a good thing, take it for what it's worth, and then move on towards your next dream. You just got to keep working towards your goal, whatever that goal is. And everybody's goals is different. Some people it's lifestyle. I want to be busy the time I'm there, but I want to have a certain amount of time off. I want certain vacations. I don't want to worry about certain things. And so there's different goals for everybody.
Yeah. And I think on the flip side, I would say that, if you know you're not going to be happy doing anything, then it may be worth it just to rough it out. Like if you know you're going to move to Beverly Hills, I wouldn't necessarily come to Austin for 3 years with the intention that you're ultimately going to go to Beverly Hills. You should just go to Beverly Hills and just bust your butt and make it happen. And because at the end of the day, that'll reward you more. Because I think that there's a lot of people who don't spend a lot of time thinking about stuff, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh crap, I'm going to graduate in 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of pressure to get a job quickly. And that's not always the right job, and, whereas your experience in Miami where you learn, these techniques and it becomes very helpful for you. I think a lot of people are not necessarily going to a huge plastic surgery destination. So they're landing in Kansas and they're doing pressure sores in Kansas for a hospital, getting their boards done. This idea that they're ultimately going to do something else, it's probably better to just do something else.
And it's really hard to transfer, because most of those patients from Kansas aren't going to come to Austin, to get their pressure sore fixed. And so, they might.
You'd be surprised. My chairman had the amazing ability to attract pressure sores, like a magnet.
But it's such a good point, because I think it's one of the flip sides, and we obviously have a great career and living off that and so forth. But it's really it's hard for us to pick up and move without starting from scratch all over again. And so, to your point,
it costs you a lot.
It does. It does. It's a big reboot. What we like to do a little something called Behind the Bovie. If there was one nugget of the behind the scenes of running a plastic surgery business, what would be one kind of nugget that people would never think about?
I think a couple of things, and I see this happen all the time. I think one, the patients being judged the second that they walk through the door. In fact, actually, they're being judged ahead of time, in that you should be nice. Like a friendly patient, like I might charge you less money, and if you're somebody who's trouble and you're difficult with my staff, then that sends up huge warning flags. I think patients don't really understand that. So, treat others as you would want to be treated.
The golden rule?
Yeah, totally, which you'd be surprised. And then the other thing is that all things in life are negotiable. So as you, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, so I'll go really behind the scenes, is that, the price is not always the price. And it just depends on a lot of factors. And so, I wouldn't be afraid to negotiate the overall cost of your procedure, especially if you're looking at multiple procedures, right? So that's, if it's just a single one-off liposuction, you got less ability to change that price, versus if you're talking about a, $25,000 mommy makeover, there's perhaps some opportunity for negotiation.
It's funny. A celebrity recommended a book called Never Split the Difference to me.
Great book.
I don't know if you've ever read that one. If not, it's a great one. I put that on your list. It's a good one. But, even for people trying to join a practice, and one of the things that he references in his book is that, if you don't ask the question, then you don't know what the answer is, because, somebody may want something that you don't even, you're like, oh, sure. And that may be like, hey, I want this extra day, or I want an extra 2 days of vacation a year, or something that you probably don't even care about. And it's just, he just talks about, if you don't ever ask the question, you don't ever know what the answer is, and kind of getting to what people really want or need and so forth. So I think that's a great point from a patient standpoint, and even somebody looking for a practice.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I hired Ross, it was more important for Ross to have 6 weeks of vacation than it was for him to make a lot of money. And so we just found a common ground that would work.
But if you don't ask those questions, you don't get to a point, and then both people can be frustrated, and you don't even, when there's an easy solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. It takes out some of that assumption on both sides.
Can we do a quote of the day? Who's going to do our quote of the day here?
I think we both have one.
Yeah, we're in a tag team.
You want me to go? You first? Me first?
You first.
Mahlon
All right.
gets a double? Okay,
He gets
cool.
a double.
All right.
This one's from Albert Einstein. Try not to be a man of success, rather become a man of value.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think that's good.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that because from a business side, not necessarily about building a successful business. In my mind, it's about building a business that brings value to people. And I think the success ultimately comes from having that value on display and having people receive some of that value.
Yeah, I like it.
You're going to try and top that, G, or what's going on?
Mine's not so.
Okay.
What's the word I'm looking for? Deep. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was DJ Quick who once said, "If it doesn't make dollars, it don't make sense."
On that note, we'll move to our closing here. Well, I'd like to thank Dr. Kerr for joining us today, our celebrity cast. And as our new tradition that we just started, Dr. Kerr, we don't actually pay him for being on the podcast, but we do give him a shiny new Yeti mug with our Plastic Surgery Untold logo. So
Wow.
thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
Toss you
look at that.
Toss you a big old new Yeti there.
Look at
And
that.
so please download us on anywhere where you get your favorite podcasts, iTunes, iHeart, Pandora now, Spotify, Plastic Surgery Untold, greatest podcast in the world, as voted by us. Thank you guys. See ya.
Thank you
See
guys.
ya.